Hi, welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. If you just stumble upon this video and are looking for some light entertainment, this is not going to be for you. Most likely your worldview and your basic assumptions are going to be turned on their head and you'll be required to think. So if you're truly interested, do take the time to listen carefully and maybe pause the video at times to take notes or screenshots. Alright, in this video we're going to take a look at the book The Idea of the World by the contemporary philosopher Bernardo Kastrup. Kastrup has 2 PhDs, one in philosophy and one in computer engineering. He is a proponent of a philosophy called Analytic Idealism. He has written 10 books on the subject and his 11th one, with the title Analytic Idealism in a Nutshell, a straightforward summary of the 21st century's only plausible metaphysics, will come out this year. So the book we're looking at is an amalgamation of 10 papers that he wrote and turned into a book. And the book basically attacks our current mainstream materialist paradigm. The papers collected in this book cover a wide variety of fields such as philosophy, neuroscience, psychology, psychiatry, and physics. Each paper has been individually published and peer-reviewed. I'm going to try and extract the essence of Kastrup's argument throughout the book, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible so you understand, even if you have never dealt with philosophy or philosophical books before. But before we get into the book, I'm going to have to say a couple of words about idealism and metaphysics in general. This is important information in order for you to put the book's content in perspective. So if you already know about the philosophy of idealism, feel free to skip ahead. This video is time-stamped, so you can skip ahead to any of the chapters as you wish. Idealism is a philosophical perspective that holds that everything, so all experiences and everything material, ultimately is based on mind. So ultimately, reality is a product of mental activity. This is not a new concept. It goes back thousands of years to the Vedic traditions of the East and Neoplatonism in the West. Idealism stands in contrast to the philosophy of materialism or physical realism, which is today's mainstream view. Materialists think that the material world exists independently of mind. This, of course, has been the mainstream philosophy, the paradigm for the last 300 years. The philosophy of materialism is closely tied to Newtonian physics. In a way, you can say that materialism is the metaphysical foundation of Newtonian physics and all the science that has been built on that. We're currently seeing a revival of idealism, and that has partially to do with the advent of quantum physics and science's inability to make sense of quantum physics, or rather to integrate Newtonian and quantum physics in an overall theory. The situation is that the materialist paradigm just doesn't work for us anymore. It fails to explain phenomena that we need to get our heads around in order to progress as a species. And idealism seems more promising candidate to allow us to do so. There are many subforms of idealism, but we can differentiate 2 major branches for now: subjective idealism and objective idealism. Subjective idealism, also known as solipsism, says that only the mind and its perceptions are truly real. The external world is seen as a projection or creation of individual consciousness. Without consciousness, there would be no subjective experience and consequently no material reality as it is understood within the framework of subjective idealism. Objective idealism holds that reality exists independently of individual minds but is ultimately grounded in a universal or absolute consciousness. Reality is considered a manifestation or expression of this ultimate consciousness. In order to help you understand the difference between the prevailing materialist paradigm and these two strands of idealism, we can use thought experiment that pretty much every student of metaphysics will encounter at some point in their training. It is a question that is posed and that as a student you are supposed to ponder. I will first give you the question and then give you 3 possible answers, one for each philosophical stance, so you can decide for yourself which one makes the most sense to you. You might want to pause the video at this point and just think about that question for a while. The answer to that question depends on one's philosophical perspective. First, let's see what a materialist would answer. From a materialist standpoint, the tree falling would produce sound waves regardless of whether there is someone there to hear it or not. The sound, in this view, is a result of the physical event. Now let's hear what a subjective idealist would say. From a subjective idealist perspective, the answer might be that the sound only exists if there is a conscious observer. Without someone to perceive or experience the sound, it may not be considered a sound in the absence of consciousness. And finally, let's hear what an objective idealist would answer. From an objective idealist perspective, the answer would be that if there was no conscious individual to observe it, the falling tree and the sound it produces have a degree of independent existence within universal consciousness. We will find that Bernardo Kastrup's analytic idealism is closest to this last explanation. But before we go into the heart of the matter, let's first take a sort of helicopter view on why one should at all worry about such questions in the first place. Let me give you a definition for each term first. So both metaphysics and ontology are branches of philosophy that deal with fundamental questions about the nature of reality, existence, and being. You wouldn't think they're all that important until you understood what a crucial role metaphysics plays in shaping pretty much, everything we encounter in our daily world. Which metaphysics prevails at any given time in history determines how we do science, what we allow to be part of scientific inquiry, who we give funding to, what we believe in, how we organize our society, who we accept as authority, how our politics is organized. It influences our education system, our ethics and morals, right down to the way we define ourselves and what we can hope for. So it pretty much pervades every aspect of our lives. In summary, metaphysics and ontology are important because they provide a framework for understanding the nature of reality, which in turn influences our approach to knowledge, to ethics, to science, and all other aspects of human inquiry and existence. And Bernardo Kastrup's book looks at what is wrong with our current metaphysics, and he offers us an alternative. So let's get into it. Our current metaphysics, that of materialism, is based on the fundamental assumption that mind and matter are two different, separate, mutually exclusive concepts. You have mind on the one hand and matter on the other, and they are completely distinct from each other. This dichotomy is the fundamental assumption. So mind and matter are two different things or concepts. Or to put it in philosophers' speak, mind and matter are epistemically symmetric. If you just accept this assumption, you will end up trying to explain one by the other. Doing so, you have two options. You can either explain mind by matter and say that mind is a phenomenon that can be reduced to matter. For instance, you can say that somehow our physical brains bring about mind. That is what the materialists claim. Or you claim the opposite and say everything we sense to be stuff comes down to our processing sensory data. So really, all of the stuff out there is mental content in mind. Kastrup challenges this fundamental dichotomy, that mind and matter are two different things. And he shows how such a mistake was able to happen in the first place. But before we get into his line of argument, let me offer you an alternative. Kastrup eventually comes to a similar metaphor later in the book, but I think that in order to grasp the arguments, it is important to prime your mind, so to speak. So, how about we think of matter as a phase or expression of mind? With that, we get rid of the dichotomy between matter and mind. If we just allow ourselves to think for a minute that matter is just a sort of denser form of mind or consciousness, that will help you to understand the line of argument. So just think of mind as, for instance, water, and think of matter as waves or excitation in the water. Whenever there is a wave, matter occurs. At all times, though, mind or water is the primary medium in which such excitations can occur. I hope that helps. So let's move on. So materialists base their argument that mind and matter are different things altogether, and that there is an objective world out there independent of mind on three observations. First, second, and third, because of these three observations, materialists arrive at the conclusion Kastrup questions this conclusion. He says this conclusion is an abstraction and not itself an observation. In other words, while mind or observation is a given, matter is just an inference. Also, when you think about it, there are at least two phenomena that support this, and that is dreams and hallucinations. In either case, mind has the capacity to autonomously generate images that we associate with matter and take as real when they are not. Now I'm going to attempt to refute the three materialist arguments using Bernardo Kastrup's thinking. As to the correlations between brain activity and inner life, while there are correlations between brain activity and subjective experience, correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation. Such correlations might as well be explained by a shared underlying consciousness that both influences the brain and is influenced by it, rather than a materialist view where the brain is the sole generator of consciousness. As to the shared perception of the world, commonality in experiences doesn't necessarily mean an external objective world exists. Our shared experiences could arise from a shared underlying consciousness that gives rise to such a consistent experiential reality, rather than an external world existing independently of individual consciousness. As to the world unfolding independently of personal volition, the apparent external world is a manifestation of a deeper collective consciousness. From this perspective, personal volition could be an aspect of this overarching consciousness, and the unfolding dynamics of the world could be expressions of a more fundamental, unified consciousness rather than an entirely external independent reality. So I think that's enough for you to chew on for a while, and if you've seen my last videos, you've heard of the term inner standing. I suggest you approach this topic with your intuition, so by way of inner standing, as much as you try to understand it intellectually. I've had some philosophical training in university, but I would never claim to be a philosopher. Still, I don't shy away from what seem to be complicated texts, just because I might not understand something at first. I found that, a lot of times it takes both our will to understand and the courage and also the patience to let a topic sort of come to you in time. This is what I mean by inner standing. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.